Evil Dead 2 was a werewolf movie. We are talking A Werewolf in England. This one directed and written by Charlie Steeds. Steeds is becoming one of the most prolific indie horror directors here in the UK, and his films tend to be homages to the horror films of the 80s and 90s. So not exactly mockbusters, what you see a lot coming out of kind of the indie circuit, but films that are certainly influenced by the horror movies of old. And you may be forgiven with a title like that, you're thinking this is clearly going to be a homage to American Werewolf in London, but no, as I've mentioned, this is more along the lines of Evil Dead, but with werewolves. So what's the story? It's actually a period piece where we have a guy who has been arrested and is being essentially transported to be hanged, and his kind of captor is this prosecutor or something, and they have to stop at this particular inn one evening because of bad weather. However, this inn seems to be the home of this kind of mad couple who want to sacrifice the guests to a group of werewolves. And what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So the tone of this one is a horror comedy, and it reminded me so much of the kind of the tone of specifically Evil Dead 2 and maybe kind of the Army of Darkness, that sort of thing. Obviously a considerably low budget movie. And there's even scenes here that I think directly reference the Evil Dead series. So first of all, what did I like? Okay, so humour is somewhat subjective, admittedly. And this one, you know, it's a mixed bag, but I've got to say I did laugh at some of the jokes here. It's weird because you almost feel it's not going to be a comedy because of the period setting. It almost seems strangely out of place to have a kind of a horror movie set in kind of a historical period, but also a comedy, especially when it really doesn't start off really like that at all. But it has this kind of this slapsticky, you know, Three Stooges kind of vibe, which of course the Evil Dead films are famous for. Sometimes I think, yeah, the jokes maybe don't always land. I don't know if we really need to see a werewolf defecate all over someone. Let's just say they need to eat more fibre. But nonetheless, some of the humour I did actually find somewhat amusing some of the time. I actually quite like the characters here. Our kind of central protagonist and his kind of jailer, so to speak, I actually felt had quite a fun little bond, to be honest with you. That they seemed like obviously opposing forces initially, but throughout the movie, even though, you know, they're not perfectly drawn out characters or anything like that, but nonetheless they do have an arc, and I actually quite like the kind of the interplay and the kind of the chemistry between these kind of two actors. I thought that was all quite good. The werewolf effects, I feel will be divisive, but, you know, they don't look brilliant, but they've done a good job, I think, of making an 80s style kind of man in a suit werewolf movie. It reminded me of, like, if you've watched things like The Monster Squad, where we had the werewolf in that, or maybe a little bit like the werewolf in the movie Waxwork, kind of like that. So it's obviously clearly just a man in a hairy suit, but I still kind of liked it. It's like I said, it kind of looks obviously fake. I think the problem with maybe the werewolf suits is it's not so much the way they look. I actually think they're constructed all right, but I think maybe they're a little bit overlit at times, and I think the actors within the suits maybe walked around a little bit too much like humans to make it really seem all that bestial. So I think maybe the werewolves didn't come off as good as they possibly could. I think people will put it down to the werewolf suits, but I don't think the werewolf suits are actually all that bad. It's just some other aspects I feel don't help it. Like I said, I think maybe keeping in a bit more shadows would have helped, but we do see quite a lot of them. The movie also has two distinct halves. The first movie, nothing really to do with werewolves. I mean, they're kind of hinted at in regards to some of the dialogue, but it's more to do with this kind of like this murderous couple within this this inn, and it's really the second half that we actually almost bang on see kind of the werewolves, and from then on it's like a sort of siege movie. I also quite like some of the peripheral characters who I don't want to say too much, but, you know, you'll be thinking at the end of the movie, no, kind of, I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And I thought that was sort of quite good. And I have to say, despite some of the film's shortcomings, I actually had a little bit of fun with this movie. I kind of enjoyed it in a very cheesy and schlocky way, but it was a fun movie to watch. And that to me, it has a certain amount of entertainment value, despite some of the more, I guess, critical flaws that you would say with it. So let's talk about some of the flaws. Now, it's almost a mirroring of what I've already said, because, yeah, some of the humour isn't particularly funny, and it does seem out of place, certainly, in times, because there are certain characters, like our female characters, who are played dead straight, and it almost feels like they are in a different film, and some of the kind of the horror borders on parody and spoof sometimes, so it has a weirdly kind of uneven tone. I think one of the big critiques visually for me was the set dressing. This particular inn, the interior here, I felt was a little bad at times. For example, the fake cobwebs, I think, were unnecessary. I mean, there's like obvious fake, you know, cobwebs in really kind of obvious places, even in a period, you know, such as this is meant to be taking place in. I don't know if they would have just left, you know, very large chunks of kind of cobwebs hanging down. It just looks really fake. It kind of looked like the kind of a set from like a children's, you know, Halloween TV show and things like that. So I thought the set was actually quite weak. There are times when people were banging on doors and you can clearly see it's obviously not a solid wall and things like that. There are times when people will walk past the camera and you'll actually see the camera kind of vibrate as the kind of the vibrations where they're walking kind of like make the camera kind of move and things like that. So there are some kind of attention to detail here that I feel that sometimes a lot of indie horror films miss, because they don't take it, they're a lot quicker to kind of like make and don't take as many shots and things like this. So it does kind of gives it that kind of that cheap kind of feel. The acting is kind of cheesy at times, to be honest with you. I still kind of like some of these characters, despite some of the acting I don't think being particularly good. And I think our central two characters certainly overcome that. I feel the female characters, well, at least these two kind of like women that we're introduced to about kind of halfway through, I think do a good enough job. But the Innkeepers themselves, I don't think were particularly good. The guy I've seen in, I think, all of Charlie Steed's films, like, he's very, very his lines are very kind of stilted, I have to say. And there are some other characters. The acting is a little bit kind of a mixed bag, is I guess what I'm saying here. I've already kind of talked about the kind of the werewolf suits themselves, so I won't repeat myself on that one. But again, I can see them being somewhat divisive. I appreciate the fact that the werewolves look different to one another. They're not just the same costume kind of reproduced. They actually, like humans, have different kind of faces and things like that. But there it is. I think maybe it is just maybe a little bit too cheesy, a little bit too silly for some people, and a little bit too cheap. As I've mentioned, I actually did have some fun with it, and I can appreciate it has a lot of flaws, but to me, I actually kind of liked it. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed the journey of the characters. I kind of quite like some of the weird run-ins that they have with these monsters. I guess another critique, it really does play fast and loose with some of the werewolf mythology. I've mentioned the Evil Dead 2 connection here. There's a scene here involving a severed arm that I feel will annoy purists in regards to werewolf mythology. Now, in regards to some of the other stuff, we don't really see anything like silver bullets, and like it just appears very much like the Evil Dead. The way they kill these werewolves is not through silver bullets; it's through kind of like, you know, absolutely destroying the body, and kind of maybe fair enough. We can kind of, I personally can forgive that, chopping up the bodies and things like that. Fair enough, but I don't know about the arm kind of living on its own, like Evil Dead 2. That to me was a step too far, because it just to say, well, why isn't everybody part kind of living on its own? Then it doesn't really make sense in the movie. And we've never seen a werewolf have that, especially when the host body is dead and the hand is kind of still moving around. That, to me, I think will annoy werewolf purists, to be honest with you, and I completely understand that. And I have to say, that's one sequence that I actually wish they sort of took out, if I'm honest with you. Overall, I'll give this one... I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It was entertaining. It's kind of like an average straight-to-video film in a lot of ways, but it certainly has, for me, quite high peaks, but quite deep lows as well. So it maybe levels out at kind of an average score for me. So 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.